The police showed up just in time to find Margaret Sinclair, dressed head to toe in immaculate tennis whites, brandishing a measuring tape like it was a saber. She was climbing onto the hood of my F-150, shrieking at the top of her lungs that this was not my land, it was aesthetic overflow. By the time she was in handcuffs, she'd already attempted to tow my truck, steal part of a hedge, and issue me a citation for vehicular vibes. All this because I parked in my own driveway. But let me back up and explain exactly how this ridiculous circus began. I'm David Harper, 45 years old, an auto mechanic, and a proudly boring introvert. 6 months ago, I bought a small house with a double-length driveway in Pine Ridge Estates, a neighborhood where people pretend to jog but really just stop to gossip in Lululemon. The place was perfect. Quiet street, decent garage, and most importantly, a driveway long enough for my work truck and personal vehicle without inconveniencing anyone, or so I thought. Margaret Sinclair, the president of our HOA, was a walking cocktail of superiority, complex and pure delusion. She stood about 5'4" in designer sneakers, always wearing coordinated athletic wear despite never exercising, and carried her ever-present clipboard like it was a royal scepter. She'd been president for 8 years and had fined people for everything from garage door slowness to emotionally aggressive garden gnomes. And my personal favorite, mailbox sadness. Yes, she once cited poor Mr. Peterson for his mailbox looking depressed after a storm knocked it slightly askew. My so-called offense is parking my own truck in my own driveway while working on it during my day off. This was my personal F-150 legally registered, well-maintained, parked entirely on the property I pay mortgage and taxes for. That Saturday afternoon, I was simply changing the oil and rotating the tires when I noticed Margaret at the edge of my lawn snapping photos with her phone and scribbling furiously on her clipboard. The next morning, I found a note in her distinctive purple ink taped to my windshield. You are violating community curfew standards. Vehicles may not linger in visible spaces for more than 72 hours without movement. I thought it was a joke. The truck had only been there over the weekend. But the day after that, an official warning letter arrived on HOA letterhead, complete with a grainy photo of my truck and highlighted sections of HOA bylaws she claimed I was breaking. The next day brought a $250 fine for driveway clutter and visual disruption of neighborhood harmony. At the next HOA meeting, I tried to dispute it. Margaret was ready. She had a PowerPoint with 17 angles of my truck and a ridiculous chart claiming property values dropped whenever a work vehicle was visible. She even claimed the easement of my driveway was under shared neighborhood influence, meaning the last 18 inches technically belonged to the HOA she hired. A surveyor, Bill, who told her 3 separate times she was wrong before leaving in exhaustion. Undeterred, Margaret called a tow truck, reporting my vehicle as abandoned on HOA property. Luckily, I was home, showed the driver my registration, and he laughed, saying Margaret tried stunts like this twice a month. A week later, she hired a landscaper to install a hedge through the center of my driveway, calling it neutral property reclamation. The landscaper, my neighbor Tom's cousin, called to warn me. I called the police. 2 officers came, checked my deed, and told Margaret she had no claim over my driveway and to stop harassing me. She smiled sweetly and promised compliance. The next morning at 6 a.m., I caught her spray painting lines on my concrete to create a designated curb zone for visual balance. I filmed her pajamas and slippers on as she ranted about community adjacency and spiritual driveway energy. The following day, she hired a different tow service that didn't know her reputation. They called me when they couldn't confirm any violation, then called the sheriff after she tried to grab the keys from the driver. Deputies arrived to find Margaret waving internet printouts on adverse possession, claiming I'd relinquished driveway sovereignty during a spiritual communion with the neighborhood. I came out holding my property plat, city easement confirmation, and for fun, a voicemail from her saying my truck lowers the neighborhood's frequency and disturbs the communal chakras. She spent 20 minutes lecturing deputies about aesthetic terrorism before whipping out a binder full of fake testimonials, photos of my truck, and a bizarre diagram of my vehicle's supposed feng shui impact. The breaking point came when she pulled out her measuring tape. climbed onto my hood, and started explaining optimal vehicle placement theory. She was promptly arrested for trespassing, vandalism, and attempted vehicle theft. 15 neighbors filmed the arrest. The HOA board held an emergency vote that week. Margaret tried to zoom in from the holding cell, but her rant about aesthetic sabotage kept cutting out. They voted her out 6-0, even her loyal ally Barbara turning against her after being accused of botanical treason. I was reimbursed for every fine and paid damages for the spray paint. The HOA lawyer resigned the same day with a letter reading, "I can't do this anymore." Margaret has cost this HOA $40,000 in legal fees. My truck stayed in my driveway, under a new sign reading, "Private property parked with pride." Perfectly within HOA guidelines. In court, Margaret argued she was protecting neighborhood harmony through aggressive aesthetic enforcement. Prosecutor Janet Rodriguez presented videos, voicemails, spray paint evidence, and 12 neighbor testimonies. The judge asked if Margaret understood HOA presidents can't control private property. She responded with a 40-minute speech on the war against visual chaos and even brought another slideshow. The judge cut her off and sentenced her to 18 months probation, $5,000 in fines, $3,000 restitution, and a 10-year ban from HOA boards. Her face turned beet red. She shouted about conspiracies against visual excellence while her lawyer begged her to stop talking. Do you like more amazing stories?